Hello crypto boys and ghouls, and welcome back to the channel, Tales from the Cryptmancer, where we feature content on play-to-earn games on the blockchain such as Splinterlands. And in today's video, I just wanted to cover a tool in the Splinterlands Discord that I was previously unaware of, and just wanted to pass on the information to the community in case you were interested. Again, just informational purposes only. Do whatever you like with the information. I'm just sharing it with you so you have it if you're interested. So what we're going to talk about here is in the Splinterlands Discord, there is an sm-voters_hut channel under the Splinterlands bot corner. And here you can run a command called $value. And what this does is it publishes or shows you a report of the players' DEX grouped by value, right? And what this shows is three specific columns of data. It shows you a value range, the number of users, the percent of the total users, the combined value of those DEX within that grouping, and the percentage of the total value in the game. So again, this is showing you the value of accounts DEX, so cards that are owned within these accounts. And I say accounts because they could be real players, they could be bots, they could be aliens from outer space, who knows, right? So let's look at the data and what we can see here, and we can dissect some of it. What I will say is the data is pretty interesting. And let's park that for a moment and let's look at just the numbers, right? Let's look at the numbers here. So let's add up all the users here to understand the total daily active accounts that have an actual card that they own. Meaning this is someone that has bought a card or received a reward card and actually owns a card on their account. Now, it doesn't mean that includes all the bots here, because remember, some bots transfer their cards out and as of this snapshot may not own any cards in the account. So what this is again showing us is the accounts that actually own a physical, not a physical, but a digital card in Splinterlands. So let's go through the math quickly here and bear with me as I type all of these numbers into the handy dandy calculator here. So what this shows us is that there are 302,249 accounts that actually own a card in Splinterlands. Now, this is interesting for a couple of reasons, because if you'll notice, in the Peak Monsters dashboard, we have over probably 400,000 daily active users roughly. Like, I haven't checked in the last couple of days, but let's say it's around that number, right? 400,000. So of those 400,000 daily active users, we can see from this, roughly 100,000 of those don't own any assets. Either they're renting cards or they just don't own any cards, right? So that's an interesting number to understand. And this 302,000 number, I don't think anyone's really talked about this specific number, right? We've talked about daily active users, and there's been speculation around what percentage of the daily active users are bots or humans. Well, this is just another number statistic to kind of add to that bucket of data for us to maybe use in the future to deduce other information. But it's good to have nonetheless, because it's another data point that we can have verified here. So if we look at other aspects of this data here, before we go into looking at the combined value of assets and where those are allocated amongst the daily active accounts, or at least the accounts that own cards, right? Let's take a look at the US net worth of assets from 2019 as a frame of reference, just so we can kind of have something to compare the data in Splinterlands to with something we may be familiar with, like a country's allocation of assets. So this is from the Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances for 2019. So it's a couple years old, but it's pretty accurate data for the most part, right? So what this tells us is the top 10% of the population, right, owns 76% of the net worth or the total assets in the United States. So again, 10% of the population owns 70% of America's wealth. And what it also tells us in the United States that the middle 40% of US households or families own 22% of the wealth, and the bottom 50% owns just 1% of the wealth. So if we were to break that down to summarize that, what it tells us is the remaining 90% of the population in the United States owns 23% of the total assets in the United States. And remember, 76% is the number here for the top 10%. Remember that number, and we'll get back to that in just a second. So if we look at the data here in this chart, if we look at what the top 10% of the population, user population, or account population in Splinterlands is, it's roughly any account that has a value of owning $100 worth of cards or more. And we can add up the percentages here to show that. So 10.69% of the Splinterlands accounts that own cards in their accounts worth $100 or more. And then if we add up the total assets that top 10% of the Splinterlands accounts hold, that percent of assets is 98.31% of the total assets in Splinterlands are owned by the top 10.69% of the accounts. Now, this can be a little deceptive because we have accounts that rent, or we have bots that don't own cards, for example, or maybe, I guess this is bots that would own some cards, because the only accounts that are captured here, right, the 302,000 have to own at least one card to be recorded here. But, let's trim the numbers down a little bit more, and let's just slice the data a little bit differently. Let's look at, from a combined value perspective, let's look at the percentage of the net assets in the game, and let's see if we can get to that top 10% of the assets, or what that would be for the United States. Because remember, 76% of the United States assets, total assets, are held by the top 10% of the country. So in this case, if we combine the deck values that are worth $10,000 or more, that equals 76.92% of the total assets are controlled by accounts that are worth $10,000 or more. So in retrospect, let's see what percentage of the Splinterlands population owns $10,000 worth of cards. The percentage is 0.66%. So less than 1% of the accounts in Splinterlands own 76.92% of the total assets in Splinterlands. So again, in comparison, in the United States, which could be argued that has a very unbalanced weighting of assets towards the upper class, the top 10% controls 76% of the assets. In Splinterlands, well, basically almost the top 0.5%, so less than 1%, controls 76.92%. So that's some interesting data there, I would say. Now, I know when we talk about the concept of centralization and decentralization, a lot of times that's referring to blockchain technology, right? And how the blockchain solution and works. But in this case, if we're looking at the term centralization or decentralization as it pertains to an economy or assets in an economy, right? Again, 77% of assets held by 0.66% or 1% of the daily active accounts, one could say that's a centralized asset allocation, meaning a large proportion or centralized proportion of the assets are held by a small number of individuals, right? So again, just throwing that out there because I know a lot of people confuse the concept of decentralization and centralization when we talk about Splinterlands. But remember, there's different ways to describe a game, and it's not just about the technology on the blockchain, right? There's also aspects of the game that can be described in a similar fashion or categorized, right? So again, if you're interested in this tool as well as other tools that shows you like rental income of the game and rentals per day, these are things that the Splinterlands Discord does provide. I know the team has tweeted out some of this data in the past on the official Splinterlands Twitter account. So it's all available here for you to access in this Splinterlands bot corner on the Discord. If you're interested, check it out. And yeah, just wanted to provide this information because it was, I guess, provided to myself and I was able to locate it and use it as well. So just wanted to share it, do with it as you may. And if this has been information that is valuable to you or beneficial, consider subscribing to the channel, smashing the like button, and until next time, keep stacking those stats.